Good morning, traders. Welcome to Friday of this beautiful week. Make sure to swing over to ssftg.com/brief to grab your morning brief levels. Before we jump on in, we always need to check the news so that we know what's going on and when it's going on. So looking at the news calendar this morning at 8:30, we have FOMC member Kaplan speaking, and that's really about it for the morning session, actually. At 1300, we do have the U.S. Baker Hughes oil rig counts, typical Friday news announcements. Tentatively, we do also have the Treasury Department reports, and then, like we always see on Fridays, the 1530 Eastern time, of course, CFTC speculative net position stuff, which typically doesn't do anything to the markets. So as it goes, the news calendar's pretty light coming into this Friday. So let's jump on in. Today is 11/20 of 2020. Starting off on the NASDAQ and seeing where we are right now, obviously we've got some potential resistance overhead. The big question really is, is this the right channel high? This whole move down has been really kind of gross looking, and to say that this is the correct channel versus some of the other ones is difficult to say. Realistically, there could have been a channel here, which there obviously was, that broke and retested back down to the lows. But then when we expand that out a little bit further, we can see that maybe there's a potential channel that lines up here, and maybe that was a midline over here, but now it's breaking back this way. Okay, well, maybe it's a little bit of a wider channel. You can see there's a lot of confusion. The thing is, with this top of the bear channel, is it at the high of where that gap was, or is it down a little bit? If we move it down a little bit, we can see why there's some resistance here. So here again, there are some levels of confusion. Nobody really knows how to approach right now. So given that the market is in a zone of resistance, but it's still kind of stalling out, we have to look at other factors. Looking at while the market is rallying higher, we can see that MACD is driving lower. We can also see the RSI is stable and slightly lowering. But aside from the underlying stuff, the market's still making higher highs, higher lows. So regardless of what the underlying says, we're still going up. And until the buyers are broken, meaning we break through this rising support, the sellers really don't have a whole lot of reason to be selling yet. We are at the zone of resistance, and this is where sellers are going to want to try to come in. But because it's so messy, it might just be better to wait for a breakdown, then come back and sell the retrace when it's hopefully at least a little bit cleaner. Over on the S&P, we can see that the megaphone did end up being the situation, and that's the big clue that we're getting into today. The megaphone top came into play really late in the day, acted as resistance, and when the market came time to drive lower and try to get back down to the megaphone bottom, what ended up happening is, well, a higher low. And with that higher low, now we've got a situation where they could be trying to turn gears a little bit here and get this thing going back to the upside. We're at the highs of falling resistance. If we look back a little bit, we can see that, to be fair, falling resistance, I mean, it's already kind of been broken, so how much emphasis am I going to put on it here? I don't want to be completely reckless, but at the same time, it's not showing a huge amount of resistance. So if this becomes a factor to tell me not to, I can kind of wiggle that a little bit. That said, we are still at a level of falling resistance, and if we expand the megaphone out, because it is still holding, then that natural upside objective is going to be to the top of the megaphone. If buyers can continue this back to the upside, you can see how this is creating sort of a negative wedge where it's going backward, and that could very well lead into the next price action widening out as it's continuing to make its decision on whether or not it wants to go up or down from here. Over on gold, we can see price hovering around major support and resistance. It's still having a really hard time around here, and if we zoom out, I mean, it's no wonder why, right? This is a massive zone where all of the selling pressure kind of stopped, where the sellers got kind of trapped in. Market came back, got them out of break even, got them out of break even again. Oh, not enough? Got them out of break even again. Finally got underneath their break evens, and that's where the greed mode is going to start coming in. Once that greed starts setting in, when it begins coming back again, those sellers aren't going to hang on anymore. They kind of needed that to happen there. So it's not that they've given up yet. There is still obviously some resistance up here. But if it starts breaking cleanly above that, a lot of those sellers that were holding the market down are going to start jumping ship. So sellers have a chance to take it lower here and break it back down and try to get that continuation move. But right now it's still got that big support at 1861-ish. So it's got to break through the lows, get back decisively lower, and really prove either up or down who's taking control. Because right now we're sitting on top of a major level of support, and even with this giant bear bar to the downside, this bear slide, it's hard to ignore the fact that buyers are still continuing to hold price above this 1860s. Maybe they want to try to get a rally back up towards the 1900s again. This is that big pivotal moment where buyers, if they're going to succeed, this is going to be where they do it from. Now, if the sellers succeed, this is also going to be where they do it from. The MACD is horrifyingly flat. There's nothing going on here. Price action is very sideways. And from a range-bound sentiment, we're at the lows of the range. So, I mean, again, we're building more reasons to want to be long down here than anything else, unless the shorts can show some proof. Then over on crude oil, we have a very similar situation with a big level of horizontal support and resistance. That's right around the $42 mark. And realistically, the market is grinding higher. It's working its way up. But drawing it off of the top, we have this channel. And if we transpose that to the downside, we're met with a couple different ways to approach this. Either the channel low is a little bit higher, and that sort of creates this messy bottom down here, but it fits very well on nearer price action. Or we're dealing with a little bit of a wedge. We've got the channel top, but the bottom just isn't really fitting, and that's where we start dealing with a bit more of a wedge. And we could even argue that it's potentially a little bit higher up. That would invalidate that little break there, but it confirms the bounce, and the bounce. So we're losing one, but gaining three. You know, that's a worth it trade in this case. There's obviously a lot of support here one way or another. And the big question now is, when we're stuck inside this range, is going to be enough to break out of it? Right now, we're resting into R2. We've got some resistance up here where earlier buyers were potentially stuck, and it already looks like they're potentially trying to get out of break even. We're seeing volume increasing while price is going up into the highs, suggesting that there is profit taking going on. Not a lot, but that push back up towards the highs of like 42.60, 42.65, that might be where the rest of it comes in. So at the moment, the market is still bullish, and it's still grinding higher, and I have every reason to continue to want to buy. But if we can buy on a lower pullback, like a break of this rising wedge, or something cheaper back to support, it's going to make a lot more sense to try to hold on for the longer term. Then jumping over to the euro, and we've got, I mean, this channel's messy. There's a possibility of this channel in blue, which really came from these two highs. Putting it on the low, it does confirm, right? It's there, obviously, but when it comes back to it the next time, it's just a train wreck. Looks like a head and shoulders down here that the market reversed back up. So we're kind of creating the situation of, okay, well, it's a little messy down here, and now we've got a strong rally up. What are some factors going on up here that could tell us what to expect? From a cyclical standpoint, we're coming off the top of a channel. It makes sense to see shorts wanting to try to push down. If we zoom out a little bit, we can see that this is a very large continued bull channel going on that we're coming back to the bottom of, right? We're bouncing off of the lows of it. Another factor for the shorts. If we're coming down to the previous falling resistance, it expands even further, confirming all of the resistance across the top. So there's an obvious reason why, at the very least, if I didn't necessarily want to short, if I were long, I would be looking to take profit, and that means sellers either way. So when the market does come back up, this is going to be the confirming area on what they want to do. We've tried to break out above the highs. It wedged and failed. So with that wedge breakdown, we're now breaking below the low of that wedge point. That's the trend potential reversal, right? Lower low. Now we need a lower high and a continuation. Well, what better spot to get a lower high than a retest of the inside of that channel? We've already seen it do it several times before, but the caveat is that it's messy. And when it's messy inside here, it makes it a little bit difficult to where, sure, I might want to sell on the line, might also be able to get a slightly better price. So just because the zone of resistance would be a breakout retest or a breakout failure retest, doesn't necessarily mean that's the only spot that I need to be looking. Could see back to R1, back to some of the structural resistance. There's a lot of reasons to potentially want to wait for a bit higher prices first. Either way, buyers are still trying to get the continuation, and if the buyers are going to win, well, off of this middle zone of support, you can see there's a lot of back and forth action going on here. They've broken above. If we can get a higher high, higher low transition, then it's off to the races back to the upside. Right now, the buyers have a lot of work. And then finally over on Bitcoin, we've got a potential nice continuation to the upside. And right now, the big thing was this wedge, right? We were breaking out of the wedge, broke out, but just kind of fell flat on its face. Okay, in hindsight, ended up being a breakout pullback, just super, super deep. Fine, maybe this next one, right? Maybe that was a wedge, or even from over here. We've got the wedge, they broke out, now they're holding, but it just skipped and skipped and skipped and skipped. It took forever before bouncing back up. Now, if you remember yesterday, we were talking about a multiple accumulation zone there for buyers to come in, which worked out fantastically. But from coming into today's perspective, it's fairly obvious there's a lot of resistance up here. Every time the buyers try to come up, it just gets smacked back down again. That resistance zone at around 18,400 or so, I have it marked at 389.64, but this whole area is a big zone of interest where as long as the buyers can't break above this, they're just going to have a really hard time continuing the upward trend. Now, we could be starting off a nice bull cycle to the upside. You can see the aggression potentially stepping up to the plate here, but we've got to get through this resistance and back to the top of the channel to get that as proof. Right now, it looks more like we're running into this, which isn't helping the buyers. So we've got to break out of this in order to keep this going up. And if they start breaking lower, don't necessarily get trapped into that first breakdown, but if they can break down, pull back, and then get another continuation lower, that would be that extra proof that we could be looking for that deeper pullback to the bottom of the channel instead. All right, well, that's going to do it for today and for the week. Stay safe out there, keep those stops in play, and like we always say, let those winners run. I hope you had a fantastic week of trading. I hope you had a fantastic day of trading yesterday, and hopefully you have a fantastic day of trading today. Enjoy the weekend, and we will see you all back on the weekend brief and on the Monday going back into the daily. Have a good one. We'll talk to y'all later. Thanks.